link.
Yeah, okay. Then we will start. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It is my great pleasure to chair this important session. First of all, as a graduate of Zoology Department, I feel proud to be part of this important event. I would like to wish happy 55th anniversary of the department. Feel very proud to be associated with this department. I would also like to congratulate my department for organizing this first national conference on zoology with the important topic on biodiversity in changing world. This topic is in the context of COVID-19, it is much more important than earlier days. So I am very confident that this workshop will come up with unique outcome which will have long-term impact in our conservation activities. Today in this keynote speech session, we have two prominent speakers, Jeffrey McNally and Fu-En Wei. First, the first keynote speech will be by Jeffrey McNally. He will be speaking on biodiversity, prosperity, and sustainable development. Jeff McNally is a well-known scientist. He has made a substantial contribution in biodiversity conservation. He was with IUCN for more than 30 years and was retired as chief scientist of IUCN. And he has worked in over 85 countries in different parts of the world. And as he explained in the welcome remarks prior to joining IUCN, he spent in different parts of the Asia, and he was here in Nepal for 2 years in different assignment and a different work. And he is one of the chief scientists of the IUCN, and he has written or edited over 40 books and published some 500 scientific and popular articles. We are very happy to have him as a keynote speaker in the first day. Jeff, the floor is yours. Jeff McNally?
Unmute. Okay. Can you?
Yeah.
I hope you can hear me now. Okay. So how do I get my PowerPoint operating?
Organizer?
I sent you guys a PowerPoint of the talk I was going to give. So you should have it, but how do you load it? And so I can use it.
They will be sharing that in the in this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sharing is allowed.
So do you want to share from your device or you want us to share from here?
I want you guys to be able to see it.
Okay. Just a moment.
Okay.
हजुरहरूले शेयर गरिदिनु पर्छ कि है
problem आया.
Sharing now. Let us wait.
The computer connected to the Zoom and the computer in which file was loaded, they were different. So we are trying to transfer it. So it may take just 1 more minute.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, this is fine.
That's sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
all right. So we are everybody ready to start?
Yes. Please.
Okay.
Please.
So,
yeah.
So here we go. Biodiversity, prosperity, and sustainable development's the topic. That's a big topic, and what I can do is try to introduce it and share with you some of the major principles that you might wish to consider in the coming days. So let's see, how do I make it? How do I go to the next slide? Okay, there it is. So this is just a graphic showing the many different kinds of changes that there are. So we all know about evolution, you know, as zoologists. Evolution is a very important one. But then there are also flips where suddenly something happens and everything is new. For example, invention of the automobile. And then accelerating, I think that the technology on information is accelerating. Yeah, if you just look at when we were all in school and compare it with the capacity that people have now to manage information, everybody now has a cell phone. And the cell phones that we have have more power to them than our computers did when we were in school. And everybody has one, even little children. Then there's cyclical changes like with the seasons. And they're retrogressive. Sometimes we go backwards. And then sometimes everything goes wrong and it just suddenly things go badly. I think right now we are indeed in changing times. Rapid economic development. And we have the COVID-19 pandemic that also is focusing our minds on how important human health is and how it's related to climate change and to biodiversity. So what do we do with this? So next, how do I go to the next slide? There we go. So what I'm suggesting is partnerships, how we have to work together, how in Nepal, where water is so important, and protected areas are protecting the watersheds, and managing the biodiversity, the biological resources are all part of the same package. And so we have to work together as partners within the government agencies, between the neighboring countries, especially China and India for Nepal, and between the different government agencies and the private sector. So a lot of partnerships that will give us the strength to adapt to the changing conditions that are certainly going to continue to come. Okay, next slide. So we can build on the partnerships, build it on biodiversity. I sometimes think that people don't really understand biodiversity. They sometimes think it's just the variety of species, but biodiversity is a much richer topic than that. It's not a thing, it's a concept of the variability in genes, species, and ecosystems. And when we talk about biodiversity, we have to really be thinking of all three of these, not just species diversity, not just ecosystem, not just genes, but the whole package of these kinds of diversity. But one of them, so let's go to the next overhead here, the next, okay. And so here is one aspect of diversity, and that is species. And this is just an example of looking at the diversity of plants. And I picked this one because, as you can see from the map, Nepal is in the heart of one of the biodiversity hotspots. So Nepal has, the latest number I've seen is 5,856 species of plants. Remarkable diversity for the size of Nepal. And of those, 690 are used for medicinal purposes. So the relationship between plant diversity and human health is a very close and very intimate one. But perhaps more important is the next slide. Human infrastructure. You know, so here are the things that humans have done as in partnership with the environment. When I was working in the Arun Valley, there were no dams up there. Now I understand, I haven't been back, but I understand there's now a big dam on the Arun River. And then in lower left, there are towns like in Nepal. This is in Chitwan. There are highways being built, and there are different kinds of temples. This is the human infrastructure that we impose on the environment. The next slide is nature's infrastructure. And these are the different types of ecosystems. The mountains, of course, that dominate much of Nepal, but also rice fields, the agricultural lands, and the water system. These two types of infrastructure are what really support life on our planet and support human well-being. So the next slide shows how the natural infrastructure, how biodiversity helps to support this natural infrastructure through providing a concept that is actually relatively new. And I'm sure that many of you are doing research on ecosystem services. And we all know what these are now, but it's these ecosystem services, the benefits to people that are provided by ecosystems are things that we didn't always know, but now we're beginning to understand in a much more comprehensive way. And in looking at the abstracts to the papers being presented here, I noticed that many of the papers are focusing on ecosystem services. So let's go to the next slide. And so this is just a taxonomy of the ecosystem services, the kinds of, the whole range of benefits that biodiversity provides to humans, the supporting services like nutrient cycling, evolution, and so forth, the provisioning services, the food that we eat, the fresh water that we benefit, the wood, the fiber, and so forth, the regulating services with like regulating the climate, which is a huge issue now, and then the cultural services that I think are sometimes not given as much attention when we're talking about biodiversity, and I think we should. I think cultural diversity should be really part of the discussion when we're talking about ecosystem services. Okay, next slide. Then if we look at the useful genetic resources that provide the partnerships between the traditional use of medicinal plants, and throughout Nepal, and I well recall way out in the Barun Kola, the people they didn't have doctors. They really depended on the medicinal plants and the traditional knowledge that people had on how how valuable these were. And now today, protected areas are conserving a lot of these medicinal plants and helping to conserve the wild relatives of domesticated medicinal plants and the medicinal plants that are being harvested. Okay, next one. Next slide. So the wild relatives of domestic plants are also being conserved in our protected areas. And these are providing support to farmers and to agricultural researchers. And so here's another example of a partnership to conserve one of the aspects of biodiversity and species diversity and the genetic diversity of plants. Next slide. And if we look at forests, about 40% of the world's remaining forests are within protected areas. And the values of the forests in these protected areas is not just in the timber, but also in the services that they provide. They store carbon, they provide the capacity to adapt to climate change. And these lead to the idea that we need to form partnerships between the agencies that are conserving nature and the agencies that are concerned mostly about climate change, adapting to climate change. And this whole idea of adaptation is closely linked to biodiversity. And I don't think that we can really talk in a very thorough way about climate change unless we're also talking about biodiversity. And when we're talking about biodiversity, we also need to have in mind the changing climate, because biodiversity is the way that we adapt to climate change. Okay, next slide. So if we look at the legal structures that have been established for supporting these partnerships. So these, we have the Conference of the Parties, the Convention on Migratory Species. We have CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. We have Ramsar, the Convention on Wetlands, and the World Heritage Convention, and Nepal has numerous World Heritage sites, both natural and cultural. The Law of the Sea isn't such a big deal for Nepal, but it is for other countries. The Convention on Biological Diversity has now been active for almost 30 years now, and the Convention on Climate Change, both of these since 1992. And these two conventions are separate, but they really need to be working together because they provide a way of helping us to adapt to changing conditions. So these international conventions are also ways that we can promote cooperation with neighboring countries, and we can generate funding from international sources to support the kinds of activities that Nepal is implementing every day and adapting to climate change and to conserving biodiversity. Next. And then if we look at the strategic plan for biodiversity, which was agreed in 2010 for 2011 for the next 10 years. And the Aichi Targets, which are the next slide, let's go to these, to look at the next slide. Next one, there you go. So if we look at the Aichi Targets, these look at, when you look at this, it's a menu of every aspect, from public awareness down to mobilizing resources, adapting to climate change. The Aichi Targets of biodiversity include all of these. But now we need to look at these targets and see how we did over the past 10 years. The work that I've seen, the assessment that I've seen, is that none of them were completely successful, but all of them showed progress. All of them brought international cooperation, the flow of more funds, the support of partnerships with other agencies and with the private sector. While we didn't achieve all of them, I would be surprised if we achieved all of them, because the target needs to be aspirational. It needs to be something that we're looking far beyond what we're able to do today. But now that it was supposed to be this year in China, there was supposed to be the Conference of Parties to look at a new set of targets. Now the new set of targets will be next year somewhere in China. I'm not quite sure where it's going to be, but it's going to be something that we need to consider. What are the new targets? What are the new ideas that we wish to put forward to the Conference of Parties? And I hope that this conference is going to be identifying some new ideas, some new targets that we can put forward to governments to guide our activities in the coming 10 years for adapting to changing conditions. Next. More broadly, we also have the Sustainable Development Goals, and these also are expiring. And it's time to be looking at sustainable development and how biodiversity is contributing very much to virtually all of the 20 Sustainable Development Goals. And all of them are linked ultimately to a green economy that could be sustainable. Some of them perhaps need to be really reconsidered. And what I would like to do is just to highlight a few of these just to draw attention to some of them. I'm not going to cover all of them because of a lack of time, but we can see from this illustration that there's something here for everybody, and there are ways that every institution can be contributing to sustainable development. Next. So the first SDG, the first Sustainable Development Goal, is end poverty. And we know that this is really not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to, maybe not ever is going to end all poverty, but we can certainly improve the distribution of wealth to make it more equitable. And as you can see from this slide, there are hundreds of different elements to ending poverty. But there's one point that I would especially like to cover, and that's in the next slide. For ending poverty, next slide, resilience of the poor has lots of the dimensions, and many of them are going to draw on the environment. Do the poor want an environment like this, where the biodiversity, the natural diversity, the genetic diversity has been destroyed? Or do the poor want this? Next slide. Like this. What I found when I was working in eastern Nepal, in the Kashuakola, way up there, the people were living in balance with the environment, and they conserved the forest. They conserved their water. Government presence was not very prominent, but the people were prominent. They knew what they wanted. They wanted a healthy environment. They did not want to overexploit the environment. They wanted to have a sustainable environment, one that provided them with a high standard of living, even if they didn't have much money. Next. Next slide. Okay, so the second one addresses food security, and the support for the rural communities, even if they're poor. How about payment for ecosystem services? And I've noticed that there will be several presentations made on how payment for ecosystem services can be provided. So if we look in Nepal at the upstream communities who are living in ecosystems that are conserving watersheds, that are providing pure water to downstream, how do we compensate them for the service that they're providing by not clearing the forest? And that's a question that I think needs a lot of attention. And I understand that many of the papers that will be coming will exactly be addressing this point. And we need to build on it and expand it to ensure that there's more equitable distribution of the benefits from conservation are being provided to the rural people. Next slide. And we see that at the genetic resources level, Nepal is rich in, just one example, traditional varieties of tea, which I saw in eastern Nepal, which is interesting both to the tourists and well as to the tea industry. This is also something that rural people are contributing to conserving biodiversity, in this case, genetic diversity, and the ecosystems that have productive tea plantations, which also depends on clean water. Next. So a little further down, the Sustainable Development Goal 6, water, an incredibly important management issue. Nepal is really part of the water tower of Asia. The mountains, the Himalayas, the watersheds, the changing snowfall that we may see with global warming, how that's going to change the way that Nepal is managing these aquatic ecosystems, these sources of water for the downstream, both within Nepal and in the neighboring countries. That's going to be a very big issue. Next. Then we look at sustainable modern energy. Now, if we look at the change of technology, oil and coal are not going to be permanent. They're not sustainable. We've got to look at the sustainable forms of energy, and one of the most interesting is solar power. Nepal has a tremendous capacity to generate solar panel. And how about figuring out ways of ensuring that rural people are able to have access to this kind of energy? What I've seen in many parts of the world, and let's go to the next slide. Next. Okay. No, the one before this. Go back one. Can we go back one slide? There we go. So looking at this, you can see the kinds of solar panels that are being provided in rural communities, not high tech, but low tech, but technologies that people are able to develop. And you look at the way that Nepal is already drawing on solar panels, and maybe with major investments from the private sector and from development banks that would like to invest in sustainable energy, solar power is going to be an incredibly important one. Okay, then to shift gears, another kind of, next slide, another source of sustainable development is sustainable tourism. Right now, COVID-19 is showing that tourism is kind of fragile sometimes. And if we have a pandemic like COVID-19, tourism is sometimes made a little more difficult, even though it's important to the economy of Nepal. And if we look at the way that national parks are contributing, and on that elephant there is Bindu Lohani, who is back in Nepal after a distinguished career at the Asian Development Bank. And a couple of years ago, I went with Bindu and Hemanta Mishra, who I first met back in 1971 when I went to Nepal, and he was helping to run the National Parks Department. The parks that are being established in Nepal are important not only for tourism, but also for the ecosystem, the other ecosystem services that they provide. Let's look at the next slide. So also what I saw in Chitwan was really inspiring. When I first went to Chitwan, it had just been established back in 1971 and 1972. And there was a lot of conflict between Chitwan and the surrounding villages. There were 300 army troops to help to protect the rhinos. But now, look at this. Surrounding Chitwan are tourism development by the local people. Here's just one of the people that I met down there, with cultural tours, religious tours, homestay, volunteer placement, elephant rides, so many different opportunities that are being fully developed by the people who are living in and around Chitwan National Park. So for me, this has been a tremendous example of a way that the local people can benefit from Chitwan National Park. Not just the foreign tourists, not just the wildlife, but also the people are getting sustainable benefits from the sustainable management of Chitwan National Park. Next slide. Now, if we look at the social media, the new opportunities that we have, and here, this is a picture I took in southern China. This little girl is about 4 years old, and she can already manage her cell phone way better than I can manage mine. So we're going to have tremendous opportunities as the younger generation learns how to deal with the modern emerging technology, the changing technology that is going to enable them to adapt to changing conditions. New opportunities for communicating what means sustainable development, what kind of approaches are going to be available. What about the many ideas that are being put on the table at this meeting? How can we communicate those to the people who really need to hear them? It's not just other zoologists, but it's also these kind of people, the villagers. What do they need to hear from the kinds of things that we're talking about in developing biological diversity, showing how biodiversity can contribute to their ways of life, and how the things that they're doing can contribute to the ways that we're trying to conserve biodiversity. So that's over to you. Next. I also, as I'm drawing to a close here, I wanted to also highlight the importance of dealing with climate change, because climates are changing. There's no doubt about this. There's global warming. The rainfall patterns are going to change. Some of the monsoon seasons may become even heavier as the Indian Ocean warms. The clouds that are formed in the monsoon season are going to bring higher rainfall to the Himalayas and to Nepal and to India. So how are we going to take the action to address this? Next slide. Just a few suggestions. One is make sure that we conserve the forests, because the forests are the lungs of the earth, and adapting to climate change, as I've mentioned earlier, and many of you probably are in fact studying this. Conserving the forests is going to be an incredibly important part of Nepal's adaptation to climate change. The hills of Nepal need to be restored where it's appropriate to restore the forests, especially in the Mahabharat range. More needs to be invested in conserving forests. Next. So protect, restore, and promote the sustainable use of ecosystem. This is the Sustainable Development Goal 15. Reverse land degradation, halt biodiversity loss. So Sustainable Development Goal is exactly the kinds of things that we're talking about here. And we also, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Sustainable Development Goals are now undergoing renegotiation. And let's make sure that the new Sustainable Development Goals get more detailed into how we can conserve biodiversity, how we can ensure that this is halting land degradation and making our lands more productive, our lands and our waters more productive. And we do this through partnerships. The next slide. We face some challenges. And, you know, so these are mountains that we're trying to climb. Next slide. And these are the last three that I'm going to leave with you. Managing the human and natural infrastructure in ways that are going to be mutually supportive. I mentioned earlier that we have these two major kinds of infrastructure. We need to make sure that we're working them together. We do that to support sustainable development and to enable us to adapt to changing conditions. These are exactly what we're talking about here at this conference. Many good examples, lots of good ideas. Next slide. So in closing, I would just like to encourage partnerships, ways of working together, joining hands, getting government agencies, different parts of the government to work together, education, biodiversity, transport, economics, all of these need to work together in a partnership that also draws on the private sector and draws on local communities, draws on cultural diversity, helping us all work together to make the world a more prosperous and sustainable place where we'd like to live and we'd like to pass on to the next generation to live. So that's what I've tried to package in a relatively short period of time. Some ideas about how partnerships can help to contribute towards sustainable development and a sustainable way of life that we're all talking about here at this meeting. So I wish you a productive meeting. I hope that some of the ideas that I've thrown on the table are going to be actively developed further and promoted much more widely after the successful conclusion of this important event. Okay. I'm finished.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Dr. McNally. Organizer, can you please change the screen? Stop sharing.
Okay. I'm going to go have my lunch.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for sharing such a depth of your knowledge on biodiversity and linking this with SDGs. This is extremely important and knowledgeable. There is no doubt your deliberation will definitely encourage and inspire our young upcoming scientists to work in the field of biodiversity. Thank you so much on behalf of our organizing team. With this, I will move to next keynote speech. The next keynote speech will be given by Fu Wen Wei, Professor Dr. Fu Wen Wei. He will be deliberating his speech on conservation genomics and metagenomics of the giant panda. Professor Dr. Wei is a conservation biologist focused on animal ecology and conservation genetics. Professor Dr. Wei is Vice Chair and Executive Vice Chair of Endangered Species Commission in China. He is also Chair of China Chapter of International Society of Conservation Biology. He is also leading as a Vice President and a Secretary General in China Zoological Society. He is member of IUCN Species Survival Committee on Bear Specialist Group, Small Carnivore Specialist Group, and Primate Specialist Group. He has contributed more than 40 journal articles in international journal. Professor Dr. Wei, the floor is yours. Professor Dr. Wei.
Yeah, thank you very much for your great introduction, and thank you for inviting me to give a speech on this international conference. Can you see my PPT?
Yes, this is good.
So can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, it's very good. The slides are clear. Yeah, voice is clear. Thank you.
Okay, I will start it.
Yeah.
Today, I would like to talk a little bit about the conservation genomics of endangered wildlife in China or across the border of Nepal, like the red panda. As you know, the global diversity reaches its highest, no matter the mammal or insect or fishes and other fauna. However, you will say that character about diversity conservation, the global diversity is still going north. Some scientists propose that 6 massive extinction might arrive. So from the current evaluation from IPBES, you will say there are several indirect or direct threats, such as direct drivers, including land and sea change, direct exploitation, climate change, pollution, invasive land species. You will say that about 82 species abundance is declining. About 25% of species is threatened by extinction. Also, the evaluation point out the nature's dangerous decline unprecedented as species extinction rates accelerating. Most alarming is that 1 million species threatened with extinction. When you look at genetic diversity, you found that there might be 6% of wild species genetic diversity has declined. But this evaluation is not so accurate because it's just based on 91 species. More work should be done in the future. How about the situation in China? It's similar with other countries. There are about 25% and 40% species endangered. We are still facing the environment problem. The scientists are warning to humanity. There, you will say that one. So how to solve this problem? You will say Bible have proposed that of the national ark. However, from the perspective of management, as we said, the Chinese government have proposed that the ecological civilization solution. It says a good ecological environment is the most beneficial well-being of human being, and lose the water and nourish the mountain are invaluable asset. From the perspective of science, we have the conservation biology. The conservation has a lot of the subdisciplinary, such as evolutionary biology, ecology, behavior, and genetics, genomics, and metagenomics. Today, the next generation sequencing has greatly advanced the development of conservation biology. You will see a lot of the omics appear, like the genomics, transcriptomes, metagenomics, epigenomics, proteinomics, metapenomics, etc. You can use this technology to understand the process of the wild population in the past. You can know that the population genomics. You can compare different species. We can use the comparative genomics. We can use the comparative metagenomics. For the application, we come to the conservation genomics and the conservation metagenomics. For the conservation genomics, there are several papers to review the advances from the 2005 to 2015. There are several papers you can read it. So how could the conservation genomics can solve the problem understand some of the question. You said that it can evaluate the genetic diversity, identify population genetic structure, infer population history, identify genomic adaptation signature, or detect inbreeding and outbreeding. You can perform the maternity and kinship analysis. Also, you can perform the population census or genetic monitoring, use this kind of the methodology. China has a great advance in conservation genomics in the wild animals, such as we have performed a lot of study on the giant panda, gold monkey, Vietnamese leopard monkey, Aichi, and so many species has been done with these technologies. We still live in the world of microorganisms. You would say microorganisms colonize our body and play very important roles. You said that they communicate among each other and exchange signals with animal organs and systems. It's related to the nutrition, also behavior, personality, also emotion, obesity, also play a great role in your health. So microbiome is extremely hot at the present. Why? You said that technology has driven this one. As I mentioned, next generation secrets like the genomics, metagenomics, transcriptomes promote the development of the microbiome study. Also drive the microbiome projects like the NIH human microbiome projects. Lots of good paper has been published in the past 10 years. Also, there are lots of countries that initiated different kinds of microbiome projects, such as besides the NIH microbiome project, the American has initiated national microbiome initiatives, like the EU has initiated the MetaHit, and in France, they initiated the Metagenomics. In China, Chinese Academy of Sciences has initiated a project for microbiome 2 years ago. Also, it is driven by top journals like Nature, Science, and Cell. And in 2012, Nature has published a special issue. There are several papers to promote the microbiome study. After that, the Science in 2016, they have the special issue for this one. You will see there are several papers for the microbiota, so how to manipulate microbiota, etc. 2018, Cell also published a special issue. There are several papers for that one. You will see that microbiome research in the social world, the human gut microbiome from association to modulation. You cannot just know the structure, and you should know the function. Also, you should know the mechanism in the future. So how about the wildlife microbiome? You say microbiome also affect the behavior. Behavior also affects the microbiome. Your behavior shape the symbiotic acquisition. Animal may adjust the microbiota to different lifestyle history. Also, the microbiome can affect animals' behavior, such as microbiome could drive speciation, different attraction could impact disease spread, etc. There are several pioneer research in wildlife, gut microbiome. I should mention to the audience. The first paper, I think it was published in 2008 by George Gordon's lab. This is the first paper to talk about evolution of the mammals and their gone to microbiome. Also, after that, there are several papers to talk about the metagenomics, like our Panda paper, and also they are going to talk about the convergency and the co-speciation, etc. So after several years study, I proposed one new area we call that conservation metabolics. You will say the microbiome affected by the host phylogeny, morphology, also the diet and the environment. What question we should to answer? We should answer the adaptation, co-evolution, convergency, co-speciation, or ecology. After we answer this question, we can apply that to the conservation applications. What we have done in this field in the past. Today, I will talk about two species of giant and red panda. Red panda has distributed in Nepal in your country. Both of them are a symbol of the biodiversity conservation. Also, they are called the flagship species or umbrella species. Most importantly, I think, as a scientist, it should be treated as a model to study evolutionary biology and adaptation evolution. Why should I say this one? Because both of them have long evolutionary history and a unique biology. What's a unique biology? You would say both pandas are carnivores, but they are specialized to feed on the bamboo. They have some of the specialized traits like the pseudo dam. So what I'm thinking to do is to try to understand adaptive evolution to this specialized bamboo diet as a carnivore. We have done different aspects of from the morphology, like the pseudo dams, ecology and the behavior, what's the feeding strategy, habitat selection, nutrition strategy, etc. From we have done the physiology, like the energetics, metabolism, genetics, and genomics. Also, we do some works on gone to microbiome for the co-adaptation. So what I mainly focused on is focused on the evolutionary history and endangerment. A second big question is adaptive evolution. We use this funding to guide the science-based conservation. First story I would like to tell you is the population history of giant panda use the genomics technology. We sequenced the first panda 10 years ago. This is the first wildlife genome used the de novo. That's the first how to symbolize the short sequence into the scaffold. After this paper published, we do the resequence of the different pandas. We use 34 wild individuals. It's count 1%, 2% of the covered wild population. We identified 30 million SNPs. What this data to use for? We can identify the genetic structure. We found 3 population genetic structure from Qinling, Minshan, Chungnai, Liangshan, Xiangling. We also can infer their population fluctuation. You'll find the 2 expansion and 2 bottlenecks. You also can find the 2 divergence. Qinling has diverged from Sichuan in a very early area. How this population expansion or bottleneck has been affected, we added the climate change data, we found that when the when the glacier is coming, the population is coming down. Why this divergence between the Qingling and the Sichuan populations is because like penultimate glacier that is about 300 to 300,000 years ago. The second population divergence is because of human activities. Also, you can identify the local adaptation of different populations. From our analysis, we found the 2 beta test receptor gene as being found directly selected in Qingling population because their feeding behavior is quite different with Qingling and the Sichuan populations. So this is the first population genomics work on the wildlife is population nature genetics. So we have to do validation of the local adaptation of the beta test receptors of that the TAS2R21 variation confer the dietary adaptation to high coarctosine bamboo leaves in Qingling Mountains. I don't want to go to the details. Also, I collaborated with Qiaomei, the very excellent, outstanding scientist, young scientist. We sequenced the mitochondrial genome of the 22,000 years ago, the panda. You found the red one, this is Zhizhutou panda lineage has been lost in the past. When you go to the zoo, you'll find the panda do not move too much. So people say the panda is so lazy. Why? When you measure the daily and energy expenditure of the panda, you find the panda's expenditure is quite low. It's very close to the koala and really similar to the slow loris. Why it's like this way? You see, the energy expenditure regulated by some of the different aspects like the morphology. When your body size is very big, you will spend more energy. So relatively pandas, brain, liver, and kidney are reduced. So this reduced organ size probably contribute to their low energy demand. When you walk too much or run too much or active too much, you will spend a lot of the energy. For the panda, do not active too much. They spend a half day rest, half day, about half day active. So when they're still active, how far the panda can go for 1 hour? You will say that it's just a move about 70 meters. Why the pandas move so short distance? Because in the environment, there are abundant bamboo or food over there. They do not need to move far to find the food over there. So the lower level activity contributes to the lower energy expenditure. Also, the energy has regulated by physiology like T3, T4. We found the panda T3, T4 is quite low, like the red dots over there. This low level of T3, T4 may be instrumental in their exceptional low metabolism. Why the T3, T4 is so low? We go back to the genome analysis. We found that one of the unique T3, T4 regulation utilize the 5-step of synthesis of the found that in the panda, there is one single variation, the TGA and stop codon has come here. So this single nucleotide mutation in DOX2 gene may contribute to a lower level of T3, T4. How the panda still keeps the body temperature 26 degrees. We compare different black and white species of the mammal. We found no matter in the winter or in the summer, the outside of the body temperature is very low. That means the panda's pelt is thick and protect the temperature disappear from the panda body. So this paper is published in Science. Is combine different kinds of the analysis together to answer the same question of why pandas metabolism is quite low. So even though we do not have the validation data, we collaborate with the John Speakman. Again, we use CRISPR-Cas9 to make the panda mouse over there. The panda mouse compared to wild type is the body size quite low. You say body mass, daily energy expenditure, and the movement distance also decreased. This is the purple. You would say it's quite low compared with the white type. Also, the Kennedy and the brain is reduced to 2, and T3 and T4 it's reduced to 2. So a single nucleotide mutation could cause the similar traits of the giant pandas. Next one, we'll talk about the conservation genomics of red pandas. So red pandas has proposed to have 2 subspecies. Also, some scientists think like the calling group think it should be 2 species. Is that 2 species true or not? There's no genetical evidence to support that. I'm happy to have Arjun come from Nepal. We work together as my students. PhD students work together to solve this problem. We collect lots of samples from different areas in China and Nepal. We sequence the pandas. What we found from this one, we found that from the whole genome, the Himalaya subspecies cluster together is quite different with the Chinese subspecies. When you look at the genetic structure, the Nepal Himalaya is quite different from Chinese species. When you look at the white snakes, Himalaya subspecies here, and the Chinese subspecies is here. Also, when you look at the confounded genome, Chinese species is this cluster, and Nepal and Himalaya subspecies is this cluster. Therefore, they think the red panda should be classified in 2 phylogenetic species, like the Chinese red panda or Himalayan red panda. There are some difference of the plates, like the face. This is more white, this is more brown, and from the tail, this is more white, and this is more brown, dark. So it's quite clear that red panda should be classified 2 species, not 2 subspecies. What's the boundary of these 2 species in the past? Some people think that young PV, but we don't think so. We think that young jambu should be the boundary of 2 species. Even though we do not have the, some samples in India with CT, but one of the scientists, he collected samples from the from key in India. This is what dots. You say so by clearly cluster with the Chinese species, not cluster with the Himalayan species. This all of this data appears in the east of this part of the that's better. How many times? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Maybe there's some.
Excuse me, Professor Dr. Lee. No. We are having some problem with sound. There is problem with sound. Can't really hear you. So our technician back here, they are into it. So can you wait for a few minutes and you will come back again?
Okay. I will.
Management team, please. Hello.
Can you rejoin in the meeting? I think we receiving disturb from Professor present side.
Can we continue, Professor, now? I think it may be corrected.
Professor, we are back. So please continue. Hello, Professor. Off circuit today. Can you cross check?
I think the problem is from the speaker's side, and probably he has been disconnected now. Official one is not here. He is disconnected. Probably the sound problem.
Both of the Chinese red panda and Himalayan red panda have the different population. Nepal Himalayan red panda, the population is going down continually. The Chinese to go up a little bit. Also, you've said the divergence of the both of the pandas, red pandas over there. You found that, as we say, the yellow jambu should be the divergence, the boundary of two red panda species. You say Nepal, Himalaya, red panda, the genetic diversity is quite low. Chinese biodiversity is quite, because of their population is going down in the past. So next I will talk about a little about the convergence, the evolution of the giant panda, red pandas. But how do you understand the convergence of both pandas? You will find that to understand shoot them, we sequence red panda and improve the panda genome. We use a different methodology. We found 70 adaptive convergence gene. Some 9 of the adaptive gene is related to shoot them, development and essential nutrition utilization. You will have this 2 of genes quite related to the senior development, and it's quite different. When this gene has been changed, there should be the polydactyl phenotypes. Also, I found several of the genes related to the essential nutrients utilization, like lysine, acrostoic acid, vitamin B2, B12, etc. Also, most interesting, I found the umami gene is shieldized. umami gene is to synthesize the protein. So that's might be because of the red both of the panda has feeding on the bamboo. This is a very first comparative genomics papers has published in the past. Also, we follow up with doing the panda mouse again. We found that this mutation, the panda mouse affected their senile morphology at the top as expanded. Also, you use the GLIN2 protein, you found this here. We found the movement is quite low because of the mutation in the KI mouse is quite low. Wild type is quite fast. It's disappointed that we did not find the shoot them expired, but we still found some of the hyperplastic of stinking row in the panda's mouse. For the microbiome, you say in the past, we found panda not only digest the protein, the fat, they also can digest the part of the hemicellulose or cellulose. Why? Because the genome cannot encoding the enzyme of the seminotis digestion. We think microbiome could help them. So when we study the microbiome, we found a high proportion of fabricators. In it, there are 13 OTU closely related to the cellulose and hemicellulose digestion. Also from the microbiome, we found some of the enzymes, such as this one, this three enzymes, they can digest the cellulose into the beta glucose. Also found some of the 1,4-beta-D cycling, some enzyme to digest the hemicellulose. We also studied the hypothesis that diet shift would influence the panda skunk microbiome because the pandas shifted their diet from the bamboo leaves to bamboo shoots and to bamboo stems. This shift could affect their microbiome. We also found a difference between among this different phage. I don't want to go detail. You find the difference between leaf and shoot period. You count the functional difference in the leaf. In the leaf period, they digest more of the cellulose. In the bamboo shoot period, you use more on the protein and the fat digestion. We try to understand the convergence of the microbiome between the giant panda with the others. We found the compositional convergence. You would say this is a species tree, red panda cluster with the ferret, giant panda cluster with bears. However, from this tree, you'll find from microbiota, you'll find the giant panda, red panda cluster together. Let's show that is a convergence. No matter from the PCA1 or PCA2, you find the difference. Also found the functional convergence, like the starch metabolism or vitamin B12 synthesis. The pathway is quite similar. My funds are supported by several of the foundation, and thank you very much for your attention. Finally, I would like to present, this is my new book. It will be in English soon next year. Thank you again for your invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Can we change the share screen? Close the sharing. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Professor Dr. Wee, for such an eye-opening presentation. Extremely happy to learn more and explore more in this field. We are also very much impressed by your in-depth work on conservation genetics and metagenomics genomics of the giant panda. Thank you so much for sharing this in as your keynote space. We are very much impressed by the knowledge on this. With this, I would like to request my co-chair, Dr. Chiranjeevi Prasad Pokhrel, to summarize the key issues of these two keynote pieces in this session and close this important session. I thanks and I pass on to my co-chair, Dr. Pokhrel.
It's my great pleasure to be invited to give the presentation. Thank you for your invitation, and thanks to Arjun, who has done excellent work. He's a wonderful Nepal student. I would like to have more Nepal students working in China in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
Dr. Chiran?
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair, Dr. Siddharth Bajaj, sir. At the very inception, I would like to thank the Central Department of Zoology before going to the closing and for providing us an opportunity to be the part of this important conference. In the keynote speech, we have two senior scientists, one from the Professor Jeffrey, who deal with the biodiversity, who talk about the biodiversity, prosperity and sustainable development, and Professor Wei, conservation, genomics, and on endangered wildlife. So first of all, I would like to say something on the Professor Jeffries, which he discussed on the we speak on the biodiversity, prosperity and sustainable development. In his keynote speaking, we can clearly see that is the partnership in conservation is very crucial, very crucial for the adaptation and changing context, as our theme of the conference is also the biodiversity in a changing world. So he more focused on the changing context, and we can see, and he also highlighted that Nepal is one of the biodiversity hotspot, which is also we can take Nepal as one of the best indicator, because we have the high Himalayas, and we can see very fast in the climate change what he has also indicated there. And the main cause of this all these things, the degradation and the challenges, is the human activities. And he also highlighted, basically he highlighted three major things. That's the technology, climate change and human activities. And for this, to overcome all these things, to understand, the main point is the partnership in conservation, what I feel from his presentation. And the natural resources, the conservation, that's the what we have to do is that the economy, and that we have to main focus on the ecosystem services. From there we can deal with many issues, as he focused that human health, which is very important, and it's also we can deal from the ecosystem services, and also agricultural resources, value of the protected areas and adaptation of climate change. And the end thing is that the tourism is also one of the part which we have to consider and highlight on the international convention and the partnership, again in partnership. And he also mentioned a lot of the convention treaties that we have already focused, and we are also ongoing in the process, like sustainable development goals. That's how this sustainable goals is very important, and how all the components is very important and linked with a green economy. So also he has shown slides which is really alarming, which is very degraded, and it's how important and it's very important to think that the community living in the upstream and downstream should be in one place. That is more focusing on the partnership again. So we have to understand that for the conservation we need a partnership, local, international, we can see we have to be in one place. I mean, the whole globe should be in one place, so we can achieve what we are thinking. And also our different based on our treaties also many. So the technology also is one of the important, as he mentioned, that we also already adopted in high Himalayas areas. Even in, he give example of Nepal, that solar energy power is one of the adaptation, that how we can use the technologies also. And also the tourism culture is one of the important part, which we can deal with the in climate change adaptation. And the critical challenges also he mentioned, that at the end of what he highlighted is partnership. So for the conservation, we need really a partnership, and the biodiversity loss is happening due to the human activities. So we have to be in one place. And what he ended up is that partnership can help address such challenges, and our duty to pass new generation. So this is the very important keynote speaking from Professor Jeffrey. We really enlightened from his keynote speaking, and it's one I have also got an opportunity with him to be a part in the International Alliance of Protected Areas. So I also got a lot of opportunity during that period also. So I believe that his keynote speaker highlighted and give us opportunity to understand and to be more strengthened in upcoming days. And I would like to address from the professor way. He more focused, and his presentation was more focused on the conservation genomics, genetics, which is really on the endangered wildlife species. Globally, he focused on the global, how global biodiversity is degraded, I mean declining and lost. Maybe he just focused on the genetics, how the genetics is very important, because without knowledge of the genetics, we may not understand why the species are extinct, why species are extinct. So he also shows some of the alarming slides, which really touches us. And due to the genetic loss, there are a lot of extinction what he presented. And also he mentioned that the Chinese government, to solve these issues, the Chinese government's really promoting ecological civilization. That means the biodiversity conservation along with the genetics science or genetic science. So the conservation genetics and is very important and need to transfer to the generation to generation. So also he focused on many studies, scientific studies, that he really covered a lot of important things in a very short period. It's really knowledgeable, and also it takes time to understand and the genetics. But in the very short time, we can understand few of the things, that how the genetics is working in wildlife conservation. So a lot of technical outcomes he shared with us, and also he linked with the human and the wildlife, how the genetics is in the like microbiomes, how the human microbiomes is working and the wildlife microbiomes are working, and this is all for the adaptation. And he focused like the two important species, the giant panda and the red panda is the two important species, and the how they are really adaptive and the long history in the evolutionary. And they are also considered as the carnivores, but their diet is the main diet is the bamboo shoots. So it's see how the evolution history can see. We can take an example, as he mentioned also, this panda, the giant panda is also in globally they considered as the conservation species. So this species is very important. And the very important part that he mentioned, and he also described about this genetic structure, is like morphological and behavioral and physiological things within the animals. That's a very important part for us to understand the value of generic study. And at the end, he also shared with us the study he made on with the team of the students from Nepal, and under his guardianship, that the identified of the species, the different species of red panda from Nepal and from China and India, Bhutan. So the Himalayan red panda, generally before we did not we haven't identified that the red panda, we have a different species from Nepal, but now we can clearly know that we have a Himalayan, the different species with a Himalayan red panda. So it's a really great achievement for us in the field of conservation. So at the end, I would like to thank both the keynote speakers, Professor Jeffrey and Professor Wei, for providing us a wonderful speech in this important conference. And before going to the end, to close, I would like to thanks to all the participants here, basically especially the Central Department of Zoology, for providing us the opportunity to be the part of this important conference. Thank you. And I would like to conclude my remarks, conclude my comments here. Thank you.
Over to Central Department of Zoology.
Yeah.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to thank Siddhartha Ratnabhadracharya and the Chiranjeevi Prasad Pokhrel, chair and the co-chair of this session. And we will be having the next session from 12:40. This is the lunch break. And at 12:40, we will be having 3 parallel sessions. And we'll be back for the plenary sessions at 4:30. Thank you very much, all the participants and all the professors, the keynote address, keynote speakers, and all of the guests. Thank you very much. We'll be meeting at 12:40 in parallel sessions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye.